I still remember the morning it all started, the day the new boss walked into the office. Everything about him screamed confidence. The sharp suit, the expensive watch, the way he shook hands like he already owned the place. We'd all heard about him before he arrived. Some corporate hotshot from another city who was supposed to bring change. None of us really knew what that meant, but deep down, we all felt the same nervous tension. Change rarely favored the people who worked hard in silence. I had been with the company for 7 years, loyal through the ups and downs, the long nights, and the endless deadlines. I wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, but my work spoke for itself. The last project I led brought in over $8 million in profit, and everyone, from the marketing team to finance, knew the role I played. So when our team discussed salary adjustments, I thought recommending a raise for myself and my team wasn't asking for too much. We had earned it. I didn't know then that the simple recommendation would put a target on my back. When the new boss, Richard, arrived, he started with smiles. He called me one of the company's most valuable people. He said he wanted to learn from me, that he admired how I ran the department. I wanted to believe him. For the first few weeks, he asked for my input on everything: sales strategies, client meetings, even lunch spots. It felt like we were building trust. But looking back, maybe he was just studying me, figuring out how to use what I knew before he made his move. A few weeks later, we had a major client presentation coming up, our biggest yet. The deal on the table was worth $60 million, the kind that could change the company's future. I had been preparing for it for months, working late, perfecting every slide, every number, every possible question they might throw at us. The pressure was massive, but I was used to it. I'd been in tougher spots before. I didn't realize that while I was busy focusing on the deal, Richard was busy focusing on me. The week before the presentation, he called me into his office. His tone was different, colder, distant. He said he'd reviewed the salaries across departments and that some adjustments were coming. I thought it was a good sign. Maybe my raise was finally happening. But instead, he slid a folder across the table. Inside was a notice. I was being reassigned. Not fired, not laid off, just demoted to a supporting role. The reason? Restructuring. My heart sank. I could barely hear his words after that. All I could think was, why? What had I done wrong? I remember standing there, staring at him, trying to keep my voice steady. Is this because I asked for a raise? I asked. He didn't even blink. No, it's about alignment, he said smoothly. You're great at execution, but I need someone more aggressive leading the big deals. He smiled like it was supposed to make me feel better. Then he added, you'll still be involved, just in a smaller capacity. Smaller capacity. Those words echoed in my head the entire day. My team was shocked when I told them. They knew how much I had built the project, how every decision, every strategy came from months of hard work. But in corporate life, things move fast. You can't argue with hierarchy. Richard was the new boss now, and what he said went. He replaced me with someone from his old company, a man named Alex. Flashy suit, loud voice, and zero understanding of how our clients worked. Richard loved him, probably because he reminded him of himself. Suddenly, the strategy one had worked on for months was being rewritten overnight. The client's preferences, their culture, their pain points, everything I had researched was tossed aside. We're doing it differently, Richard said. More modern. More bold. I wanted to speak up, but I had no voice anymore. I was just support. The night before the pitch, I stayed late, quietly reviewing the slides Alex and Richard had changed. I couldn't help it. I cared too much to let it fall apart. And what I saw terrified me. They had overpromised, big time. Unrealistic numbers, vague commitments, things our company couldn't possibly deliver on. I tried warning Richard one last time, carefully choosing my words so I wouldn't sound insubordinate. He waved me off. Don't worry, he said. You're too cautious. That's why I needed someone else running this. So I walked out that night, defeated but not surprised. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe his boldness would work. Maybe I was just bitter about the demotion. But deep down, I knew what was coming. The day of the presentation was chaos from the start. The client's representatives, 4 of them, were sharp, serious, and well-prepared. They asked tough questions, real ones, the kind that required deep understanding of the product, the market, and the previous contract history. Alex fumbled, dodging answers, glancing at Richard for help. Richard tried to cover, but his confidence cracked. I sat at the back, watching the whole thing unravel like a slow-motion car crash. By the end of the meeting, the clients were polite but distant. They said they'd be in touch. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. The next morning, the official email arrived. They were pulling out of the deal. $60 million gone. Months of work gone. And all because of one man's ego. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Maybe Richard would finally realize what he'd done. But instead, he doubled down. He blamed the failure on legacy processes, a not-so-subtle dig at me and my team. He said the company had to modernize faster, which meant more cuts, more restructuring. People were furious, but fear kept them silent. No one wanted to be next. Then something unexpected happened. A quiet storm started brewing within the company. Some of the board members started asking questions about the failed deal, the decisions that led to it, and why someone with my track record was suddenly sidelined. I didn't know it yet, but the truth was beginning to surface. And when it did, it would shake the company to its core. Because Richard hadn't just lost the deal, he'd lost much more. And the fallout from his arrogance was only beginning. That's when things started turning in ways none of us could have imagined. I didn't sleep much after that disastrous meeting. The loss of the deal wasn't just numbers on a report. It was months of late nights, early mornings, and sacrifices that suddenly meant nothing. My mind kept replaying the looks on the clients' faces when they realized we couldn't back up half of what Richard and Alex had promised. Disappointment mixed with disbelief. I could tell they felt deceived. And I could tell Richard knew it too. But the next day, he acted like nothing had happened. He walked into the office smiling, greeting people, even cracking jokes in the break room. It was almost surreal, watching him pretend that everything was fine while the rest of us could feel the tension building like a storm. By noon, whispers started floating around. Some people had overheard Richard arguing on the phone with someone from corporate. His tone was sharp, defensive. The words, accountability, and performance review came up more than once. But in the office, he kept his cool. He even called a team meeting that afternoon, saying we needed to move forward and learn. He stood at the front of the conference room, hands clasped, giving one of those practice speeches. "Failure," he said, "is part of innovation." I almost laughed at the irony. Failure wasn't the problem, it was arrogance. But I stayed quiet, like everyone else. After the meeting, my teammate Clara came up to me. She'd been with the company almost as long as I had and knew how much work I'd poured into the project before Richard took over. "He's trying to spin it," she whispered, shaking her head. "But people aren't buying it. The board's already asking questions." That gave me a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Relief that the truth might finally come out. Anxiety, because I knew how messy things could get when corporate politics got involved. I'd seen good people crushed under the weight of blame before. That evening, I got an email from one of the board members, Mr. Hayes. It was short and professional. He asked if I could meet with him privately the next morning to discuss recent project outcomes. I sat staring at the screen, wondering if this was finally my chance to tell the truth. But part of me hesitated. Going against a new boss was risky, even if you were right. Especially if you were right. The next morning, I arrived early, nerves twisting in my stomach. Mr. Hayes was an older man, calm, sharp-eyed, someone who had seen every kind of corporate storm. He greeted me kindly and motioned for me to sit. "You've been with the company a long time," he began, his voice steady. "I've followed your work. You've got a solid reputation." I nodded, unsure where this was going. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Tell me honestly, what happened with the deal?" For a second, I just looked at him, trying to read whether he genuinely wanted the truth or if this was a trap. But then I thought about all the people who had worked hard on that project, the late nights, the sacrifices, and how Richard had thrown it all away. So I told him everything. Not dramatically, not with emotion, just facts. How the proposal was changed, how the data was exaggerated, how my warnings were ignored. Mr. Hayes didn't interrupt once. He just listened, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That confirms a few things." I left his office unsure whether I'd just saved myself or sealed my fate. The next few days were painfully silent. Richard acted normal, but there was something off about him. His smile was tighter, his laughter shorter. He'd been called into multiple meetings with the higher-ups, and every time he came out, his face looked a little more strained. Word spread that corporate had started a full review of the project, including emails, presentation drafts, and meeting notes. It was only a matter of time before they saw the discrepancies between my original plan and the version that went to the clients. Around that time, Alex started panicking. He wasn't as calm under pressure as Richard. I could see it in how he'd pace the hallways, snapping at interns and avoiding eye contact with anyone from our team. Once, I overheard him on the phone saying, "He told me it was fine. He approved everything." I didn't need to guess who he was. The walls were closing in, and everyone knew it. Then, something unexpected happened. Richard tried to make peace with me. One afternoon, he stopped by my desk, smiling like we were old friends. "Hey," he said casually, "I've been meaning to talk. I know things got tense before. I just want you to know there's no hard feelings." I forced a polite smile, but inside I was on alert. He continued, lowering his voice. "I might need your help preparing a follow-up report for the board. You know, to show we're learning from the experience." It took everything in me not to laugh. After sidelining me, after blaming me indirectly, now he wanted help. But I just said, "Sure, I'll see what I can do." Because sometimes, keeping quiet is the smartest move, especially when the truth is already doing the talking for you. The following week was chaos. Emails were flying, meetings were nonstop, and the corporate auditors were everywhere. People were tense, avoiding conversations in hallways, whispering behind closed doors. The atmosphere felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for an explosion. And then it came. On Friday morning, an all-staff meeting was announced at the last minute. The kind that made your stomach drop before you even knew what it was about. We all gathered in the conference room, the air thick with silence. Richard walked in first, followed by Mr. Hayes and a few other executives. You could tell right away something was wrong. Richard's confident walk was gone. He looked pale, his jaw tight. Mr. Hayes did most of the talking. He explained that the internal review had uncovered significant discrepancies in the proposal process and that accountability was being taken at the highest level. Then he turned slightly toward Richard. The room went still. Richard didn't look up. "Effective immediately," Hayes said. Richard will be stepping down from his position as regional director. There was a long, stunned pause. No one spoke. Richard just nodded slightly, his face expressionless, and walked out of the room without a word. Just like that, the man who had walked in a month earlier full of swagger and charm was gone. After the meeting, people were whispering again, but this time, the whispers were mixed with relief. It felt like the air had cleared after a long storm. Still, I knew this wasn't over. The damage from that deal had spread far beyond one man. The company's reputation had taken a hit. Clients were questioning our reliability. Morale was low. And somewhere deep down, I felt that this was only the beginning of a larger story. Later that day, Mr. Hayes called me again. He thanked me for my honesty and said the board would be restructuring leadership again. He hinted that they might want me to take a more active role in rebuilding the client's trust. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even proud. But instead, I felt uneasy. Because while Richard was gone, his mistakes were still echoing through the company. People who had followed his orders were now scrambling to protect themselves. And Alex, he didn't just disappear quietly. Rumor had it he'd been contacting the client behind the scenes, trying to shift blame and save his own reputation. That night, as I walked out of the building, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. Something bigger. Losing the deal was one thing, but the lies that had come with it had set off a chain reaction that none of US could control. And as much as I wanted to move on, part of me knew this wasn't over. The truth was still unfolding. And the more it came to light, the more dangerous it was becoming. Because Richard might have lost his job, but what he left behind was far more complicated than anyone realized. The following week felt strange, quiet, but not peaceful. Richard's departure had left a gap, not just in leadership, but in the atmosphere of the office itself. Everyone was trying to act normal, yet every conversation seemed cautious, every decision slower. It was as if we were all waiting for something else to go wrong. Even though Richard was gone, the mess he created was still hanging over us. The $60 million deal wasn't just a financial loss. It had damaged relationships, trust, and morale in ways that couldn't be fixed overnight. Mr. Hayes was now acting as interim head while corporate searched for a permanent replacement. He called me into his office one morning to discuss next steps. "We need to rebuild," he said plainly. "The board believes you can help lead that." I wasn't sure whether to feel honored or anxious. Leading again meant visibility, and after everything that happened, I wasn't sure if I wanted that kind of spotlight. But deep down, I knew I couldn't just walk away. Too much of what I'd built was still here, buried beneath the wreckage. So I agreed, cautiously. Over the next few days, I started digging into the remnants of the lost deal. I wanted to understand exactly where things had gone wrong, not just from my perspective, but from everyone involved. The more I looked, the stranger it got. Some documents were missing. Email threads had gaps. Entire exchanges that should have been there were gone. And financial projections that I knew I had prepared months earlier were replaced by newer versions, ones that painted an unrealistic picture. Someone had been editing the data long before the presentation. That meant this wasn't just incompetence, it was deliberate. I shared some of what I found with Clara. She frowned as she scrolled through the files. "This doesn't make sense," she said quietly. "If Richard did this, he wasn't acting alone. Someone must have helped him." That thought sent a chill through me. Who else would have had access? The finance manager, the analytics team, maybe even someone in legal. I started noticing how certain people avoided eye contact when I passed by. Others whispered and stopped talking when I entered a room. It was subtle, but it was there, the sense that not everyone wanted the truth out. Meanwhile, rumors about Richard began to surface. Some said he'd taken another position in a rival firm. Others claimed he was being investigated by corporate. No one knew for sure. But one afternoon, while I was reviewing old emails, a new message appeared in my inbox from a private account. The subject line was simple: "You don't know the full story." My heart skipped. I opened it, half expecting spam, but the contents were unsettling. It read, "Check the subcontractor payments from 3 months before the deal. Follow the trail. You'll understand why things happened the way they did." No signature, no name. Just that. For a few minutes, I stared at the screen, wondering if it was some kind of prank. But curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up the old payment records, searching for anything unusual. At first, everything looked routine: vendor fees, marketing expenses, travel reimbursements. But then, something caught my eye: a series of payments to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. The amounts were small individually, but over time, they added up to nearly $500,000. And every payment had been approved under Richard's name and countersigned by Alex. That night, I couldn't shake the thought that this went far deeper than bad leadership. I started to wonder if the lost deal wasn't just a failure, it was a cover. Maybe the numbers had been inflated for a reason. Maybe there was money moving where it shouldn't. But I didn't have proof yet, only fragments. The next morning, I decided to confront Alex. I found him in the cafeteria, sitting alone, nervously scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, he looked uneasy. "I'm not here to argue," I said calmly. "I just want to understand what happened." He didn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, but his voice wavered. I sat down across from him anyway. "You signed off on the consulting payments," I said. "The same firm Richard used before the deal collapsed." "Why?" He froze. Then he whispered, "You shouldn't be digging into that." Before I could press further, he stood up and walked away, leaving his coffee untouched. That one sentence, "You shouldn't be digging into that," echoed in my head all day. It sounded less like a warning and more like a threat. Later, Clara told me she'd overheard something strange. One of the finance analysts mentioned being told to clean up old files before corporate reviewed them. When she asked what that meant, the analyst got defensive and changed the subject. It was becoming clear that the failed deal had layers we didn't see before. Maybe Richard had manipulated the numbers for personal gain. Maybe he'd promised favors to someone outside the company, maybe both. But whatever it was, people were still trying to bury it. As I pieced things together, another puzzle emerged. The client who had backed out of the deal, the one worth $60 million, had since signed with another firm. And that firm just happened to be one Richard had ties with from his previous job. Coincidence? Maybe. But something about it didn't sit right. What if Richard had intentionally sabotaged our deal to push it toward his new partners? That would explain the exaggerated promises, the impossible targets, and the careless presentation. It wasn't carelessness, it was strategy. I brought this theory to Mr. Hayes, cautiously. He didn't dismiss it, but his expression turned serious. "Be careful," he said quietly. "If what you're suggesting is true, it could get complicated. There are people above us who might not want that story told." That sentence stuck with me, because it wasn't just about corporate scandal anymore. It was about power, influence, and the price of silence. In the days that followed, small things started happening. My system access was restricted for maintenance. My emails took longer to send. And one night, when I stayed late, I noticed my office door slightly open, even though I was sure I'd locked it earlier. Maybe I was overthinking it, but the feeling that someone was watching me was hard to ignore. Then another anonymous email arrived. "They know what you found. Stop now." It didn't say who they were, but I didn't need to guess. The deeper I looked, the more dangerous it became. Clara urged me to stop, but I couldn't. I needed to know the truth, not just for myself, but for everyone who'd been hurt by this. The company deserved to know what really happened. Every clue led to another question. The consulting firm's address didn't exist. The invoices were copies, not originals. The signature on one of the documents looked forged. It was all starting to form a picture, a blurry, unsettling picture, but one that pointed to something much bigger than a simple corporate failure. And yet, even with all that, I couldn't take it public. Not yet. The evidence was incomplete, and if I pushed too hard, they'd label me as the problem again, just like Richard did. I had to move carefully. By the end of that week, I was running on little sleep and a lot of nerves. The tension at the office had shifted again. Less fear, more suspicion. People were picking sides without realizing it. Some quietly supported me, others avoided me entirely. It felt like standing on thin ice, every step uncertain. One evening, as I was about to leave, Clara stopped me. "Someone's been asking about you," she said, her voice low. "Not from our department, someone from legal." I nodded slowly, trying to hide how uneasy that made me. "Do you think they know what you found?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just looked toward the darkened hallway, where the glass walls reflected the city lights. I said finally, "they know more than I do." And that's when I realized the real conflict wasn't just about Richard or the lost deal anymore. It was about uncovering a truth powerful enough to destroy more than one career. A truth someone was still trying very hard to keep buried. The $60 million wasn't the only thing lost. Something much bigger was at stake, and I was already in too deep to walk away. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty and unease. Every time I opened my laptop, I half expected another anonymous message. The office felt different now, colder, quieter, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Even casual conversations felt staged, like people were saying less than they knew. I could sense the tension building underneath the surface, and it wasn't just about the lost deal anymore. Something bigger was about to break, and everyone could feel it. Clara and I met in the parking lot one evening after work. She looked nervous, glancing around before speaking. "I think someone's been monitoring your access," she whispered. "IT got a request to track your activity logs." I frowned, confused. "From who?" She hesitated. "It didn't come from Mr. Hayes. It came from corporate headquarters. Someone high up." My stomach turned. Why would corporate be tracking me? Unless they were worried about what I might uncover. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through the files again, cross-checking every payment, every name. There it was again, the consulting firm that didn't exist, the missing invoices, the forged signature. But there was something I hadn't noticed before. A transfer made to a personal account, hidden in the middle of unrelated transactions. It wasn't under Richard's name or Alex's, but the initials matched someone from our own finance team, someone still working there. That changed everything. I decided to confront them, but carefully. The next morning, I found the finance manager, a man named Devlin, in his office. He looked startled when I mentioned the consulting payments. "That's all cleared," he said too quickly. "Internal audit reviewed it. His tone was defensive, his eyes avoiding mine. I leaned forward. Then why were you paid by the same account? His face froze, just for a second, but it was enough. He stammered something about standard reimbursements and ended the conversation abruptly. I left, but I knew I'd struck a nerve. Later that day, I received another anonymous email. This time, it contained an attachment, a scanned document labeled Partnership Agreement. I hesitated before opening it. When I finally did, my breath caught. It was an unsigned draft showing a proposed partnership between our company and the same firm that had poached our $60 million client. The dates lined up perfectly, just weeks before our deal collapsed. The terms were suspiciously generous toward the other firm, like someone had planned to shift the business intentionally. I printed the file and went straight to Mr. Hayes. He read it carefully, his expression darkening with every line. When he finished, he sighed heavily. "If this is real," he said quietly, then Richard wasn't acting alone. Someone inside helped him, possibly someone above him. He rubbed his forehead. "We have to be very careful with this. The wrong move could trigger a legal storm." I could hear the weight in his voice. "Do you trust me?" he asked. I nodded. "Good. Then leave this with me for now. Don't talk to anyone else about it." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. If higher-ups were involved, what chance did we have of getting the truth out? And what if the people behind those anonymous emails were trying to manipulate me too? The more I thought about it, the less certain I became of who was really on my side. 2 days later, things took another turn. Alex didn't show up for work. No one knew where he was. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then around noon, an email arrived from his account. Short and cryptic. "It's not what you think. They're covering for themselves. Don't trust Hayes." My hands went cold. The timing was too strange. I showed it to Clara, and she looked just as uneasy. "Do you think it's really from him?" she asked. I wasn't sure. But if it was, then everything I thought I knew was upside down. That afternoon, security was called to the office for reasons no one explained. Rumors spread fast. Some said there'd been a data breach. Others whispered that corporate had found evidence of misconduct. The tension was unbearable. Even Hayes seemed shaken. He called me into his office again, closing the door behind him. "There's been a situation," he said carefully. "Files have gone missing from our internal drive. Sensitive ones. And your name came up in the access logs." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "What do you mean?" I asked, stunned. "I didn't take anything." He looked at me steadily. "I know, but someone wants it to look like you did." The realization hit me hard. Whoever was behind this wasn't just hiding the truth anymore. They were turning it against me. I felt a wave of panic. If corporate believed I'd leaked data or tampered with evidence, I could lose everything. "You need to lay low for a while," Hayes advised. "Let me handle this quietly." I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure if I could still trust him. That evening, I received one last message from the anonymous account. It said, "Meet me tomorrow, 8 p.m. City Square Cafe. Bring the document." My heart pounded as I read it. This was the same account that had sent the earlier files. Whoever it was, they knew everything, and now they wanted to meet. I hesitated for hours, torn between fear and curiosity. But in the end, I knew I had to go. The next evening, I arrived early and took a seat near the back of the cafe. The place was dimly lit, with the low hum of quiet conversations and the clatter of dishes in the background. I kept the printed document in my bag, my eyes scanning every face that walked in. Minutes felt like hours. Then someone slid into the seat across from me. It was Alex. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. "They're watching everything now." I stared at him, too shocked to respond. "Who's watching?" I asked finally. He leaned closer. "The board. Richard wasn't working alone. There's someone higher up who planned the whole thing. The deal, the payments, the fake firms, it was all designed to move money quietly. Richard took the blame, but it didn't start with him." I tried to process his words. "Why are you telling me this now?" He exhaled shakily. "Because they're turning it on you next. They need a distraction, and you're the perfect target, the loyal employee who got too close." He glanced toward the window nervously. "Don't let Hayes fool you. He's not who you think he is." Before I could ask more, he stood abruptly. "I have to go," he said. If you want proof, check the internal audit logs from the day Richard left. You'll see it yourself. And then he was gone, disappearing into the street before I could stop him. I sat there, my mind spinning. Could it be true? Was Hayes actually involved? Everything he told me suddenly seemed suspicious. The warnings, the calm control, the insistence that I leave things to him. Maybe he was just buying time. Maybe he'd been protecting himself all along. When I got home, I accessed the audit logs Alex mentioned. It took hours of digging, but eventually, I found something strange. On the day Richard resigned, several files had been downloaded from Hayes' account, files labeled Contract Review Confidential. The timestamps matched the same hour Richard had been escorted out. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the entries. If this was true, it meant Hayes hadn't been cleaning up after Richard. He'd been taking over, maybe even continuing what Richard started. Then, another email arrived. No name, no subject line, just one line of text. Now you know who you're really dealing with. I sat frozen, the laptop screen glowing in the dark. The walls seemed to close in around me. I realized I was trapped between two sides of the same game, and neither one could be trusted. The truth was close, dangerously close. But now, finding it meant risking everything. And the closer I got, the more it felt like someone was already one step ahead. Something was about to happen. I could feel it. And whatever it was, it would change everything. That night, I barely moved from my chair. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the room, and I kept staring at that last message. Now you know who you're really dealing with. My hands were cold. The air felt heavy. Every sound in the apartment made me flinch. Whoever was sending those emails wasn't just watching. They were orchestrating things, pulling strings I didn't even see. And now they wanted me to know it. I replayed everything in my head. The lost deal, Richard's downfall, Alex's warning, Hayes' careful calm. It was all tangled together, but there was something deeper, something that connected all of them. If Hayes really was involved, it meant the corruption ran higher than anyone thought. It wasn't about one deal or one man's mistake anymore. It was about control, about power, and somehow I had stumbled right into the center of it. The next morning, I came into the office early. The halls were still quiet, the lights dim. I logged into the internal system again, double-checking the audit logs. This time, more files were missing. Entire folders had been deleted overnight. Someone was scrubbing everything clean. I quickly downloaded whatever I could before they vanished completely. My pulse was racing. If I didn't act fast, whatever evidence remained would disappear for good. Just then, Clara rushed in, looking pale. "Something's going on," she whispered. "IT got an urgent directive to reset your system. They said it came from corporate legal." My stomach dropped. "They're trying to erase everything," I said under my breath. Clara nodded. "You have to back it up now." I plugged in an external drive and started copying files, emails, payment trails, invoices, the anonymous messages, anything that could prove what I'd seen. Every second felt like a countdown. When the progress bar finally hit 100%, I pulled the drive out just as my screen went black. A system override message flashed briefly before shutting down completely. Clara looked at me wide-eyed. "They know," she said quietly. I didn't wait around to find out what would happen next. We left the office and sat in her car, my hands still shaking. "You need to tell someone outside the company," she said. "The media, the authorities, someone who can't be silenced." I wanted to agree, but I hesitated. If I went public without solid proof, I could lose everything. My job, my reputation, maybe even face legal trouble. But keeping quiet meant letting them get away with it. While I was debating what to do, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." No name. No explanation. Just that. I showed it to Clara, and she looked terrified. "This is serious," she whispered. "You need to get out of this." But I couldn't, not anymore. It wasn't just about me now. It was about everyone who'd been manipulated, everyone who trusted a system that was rotten from the inside. Later that afternoon, Hayes called an emergency meeting. His tone was sharp, controlled, but there was an edge to it I hadn't heard before. "Someone," he said, scanning the room slowly, "has been accessing restricted data and leaking confidential files. This is a serious breach of protocol." My heart was pounding as he spoke. I knew exactly who he meant. Until we identify who's responsible, he continued. All network access is suspended. People exchanged uneasy glances. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was panicking. He was closing in, framing the story before anyone could challenge it. After the meeting, he stopped me in the hallway. I need to speak with you privately, he said. His tone was polite, but there was something unsettling in his eyes, like he already knew everything. We walked into his office, and he closed the door behind us. You've been busy, he said, sitting down, digging through things that don't concern you. I met his gaze. They concern the company, I said quietly, and the people who've been lied to. He leaned back, smiling faintly. You think you know what's going on, but you're only seeing fragments. This isn't a conspiracy. It's business. Sometimes decisions are made above your level, and they stay there for a reason. I could feel anger rising in my chest. You manipulated the deal, I said. You and Richard. You made sure it would fail. His smile didn't fade. Careful, he said. That's a dangerous accusation. I didn't back down. I have proof, I said. Payments, documents, messages, everything. For the first time, his expression shifted. Just a flicker of surprise before he regained composure. If you had anything real, he said, you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd be fighting a lawsuit. He stood, straightening his jacket. My advice, drop it. Walk away quietly. There's still a place for you here if you play smart. I left his office without answering. Every word he said only confirmed what I already knew. He was involved, and he was scared. He wanted control, and the only way to get it back was to silence me. That evening, I went home and locked the door behind me. I plugged in the external drive and reviewed everything again, looking for something solid, something undeniable. That's when I found it, an internal memo buried deep in the archived folders, signed by Hayes himself. It referenced a strategic transition plan involving the same partner company that had taken the $60 million deal. The memo outlined steps to redirect resources for long-term benefit. It was corporate language, vague but clear enough to prove intent. I sat there staring at it, realizing this was bigger than I ever imagined. Hayes hadn't just taken over after Richard left, he had planned the entire thing. Richard had been the fall guy, Alex the accomplice, and me, the perfect distraction. While everyone looked at the failed deal, Hayes had been moving money and shifting control behind the scenes. Then came the knock on my door. Slow, deliberate. My heart jumped. I froze, staring at the door. No one was supposed to be there. The knocking came again, louder this time. I crept closer, trying to see through the peephole, but there was no one. Just the hallway light flickering faintly. I waited, holding my breath, until the knocking stopped. Then I noticed it. A plain white envelope slipped under the door. My pulse was racing as I picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No message, just a printed photo. It was me and Clara, sitting in her car earlier that week. The note at the bottom said, "You're running out of time." I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone had been following us, watching, recording. This wasn't just office politics anymore, this was intimidation. I locked every window, every door, and backed up the drive again, hiding a copy in another location. If something happened to me, I wanted someone to find it. That night, I called Alex's number again, but it was disconnected. I thought about contacting the authorities, but without direct evidence of who was behind the threats, I wasn't sure they'd take it seriously. And if Hayes really had people inside corporate, even that might not be safe. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak in the apartment made my heart race. My phone buzzed once more around 2 a.m., an unknown number again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a live call. I hesitated, then answered. There was silence on the other end, just faint breathing. "Who is this?" I asked. Nothing. Then a man's voice finally spoke, calm, measured, and familiar. "You should have listened when I said to walk away." The call ended before I could respond. I sat there frozen, the phone still in my hand, realization sinking in. It was Hayes. He knew everything now. And by morning, I knew something was coming, something that would force the truth out into the open, one way or another. The line between what was right and what was safe was gone. And the game that started with a simple request for a raise had spiraled into something that could destroy everything I thought I knew. The real fight was only beginning, and I was already in the center of it. The next morning, the office felt different, too quiet, too still. People whispered in small groups, their eyes flicking toward me and then away again. Something had shifted overnight, and I could feel it in the air. When I walked past the glass wall of Hayes's office, I noticed the blinds were drawn, which was unusual for him. He liked to be seen, to remind everyone that he was in control. But now he was hiding. That alone told me something was wrong. I sat at my desk pretending to work while keeping an eye on my inbox. Around 10, a company-wide email arrived from corporate headquarters. The subject line read, "Urgent announcement, internal audit update." My heart skipped a beat. I opened it instantly. It said that after a thorough investigation into recent irregularities, senior management had suspended several executives pending review. The list of names was long, but the last one stopped me cold. Michael Hayes. The moment I saw it, a rush of relief and disbelief hit me all at once. He'd been caught. Someone must have found the memo, or the financial discrepancies. But how? I hadn't gone public yet. Before I could think too long, Clara ran to my desk, breathless. "Did you see it?" "He's finished," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. I nodded, still processing it. "But who exposed him?" I asked. Before she could answer, the elevator doors opened and 2 men in dark suits stepped out. They walked straight toward Hayes' office, followed by the head of HR. A few seconds later, Hayes came out, pale but composed. His tie was loose, his face drawn tight. The whole office watched as they escorted him toward the exit. He glanced around the room once, his eyes passing over everyone until they landed on me. For a brief moment, we just stared at each other. There was no anger in his face, just a faint, knowing smile. And then he was gone. The tension broke. People started whispering louder, speculating about what had happened. But I couldn't shake that look, that smile. It wasn't the look of a man who'd lost. It was the look of someone who still had one last move left to play. Later that afternoon, I got a message from an unknown sender again. "We need to talk. Tonight. Same cafe where you met Alex." My stomach twisted. I didn't know if it was a trap, but I had to go. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I chose a corner table facing the door. 10 minutes passed before someone sat down across from me. It wasn't Alex. It was a woman I'd never seen before, calm, confident, dressed like she just walked out of a board meeting. "You don't know me," she said softly, "but I know everything about you and about Hayes." I studied her, unsure what to say. "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Let's just say I'm part of the cleanup team, the people who step in when things go too far." "What do you want from me?" I asked. She leaned in slightly. "You did the right thing collecting evidence. But the people behind Hayes, they're not gone. He was only one layer. There are others who won't let the story come out. They've already moved the money, changed the records. In a few weeks, it'll be like none of this ever happened." I felt a chill go down my spine. "Then why are you telling me this?" She looked straight into my eyes. "Because you still have something they don't, a conscience. And that makes you dangerous." Before I could respond, she slid a small flash drive across the table. "This," she said, "is what he was protecting. It's the real reason he sabotaged the deal. Take it, but be careful. Once you open it, there's no going back." Then she stood up and walked out, leaving me alone with the drive in my hand. Back at my apartment, I hesitated before plugging it in. I didn't know what I was about to uncover, but part of me needed to know. When I opened the folder, dozens of documents appeared. Offshore accounts, private emails, contracts with hidden clauses, and, most shocking of all, a signed agreement between Hayes and one of the company's biggest competitors. He hadn't just tried to ruin one deal. He'd been selling company secrets for months. The $60 million loss was just the cover story. It all made sense now. The timing, the sudden promotions, the convenient scapegoats, it was all part of his plan to weaken the company before handing key information to a rival. But the twist wasn't just that he betrayed us. The real twist was that he hadn't acted alone. There were signatures from higher up, names from corporate HQ. People who were still in power. My chest tightened. If I leaked this, it wouldn't just expose Hayes, it would expose the entire network. The company might collapse. Thousands of jobs could be lost. But if I stayed silent, the corruption would continue. I was holding something that could destroy everything or save it, depending on how it was used. As I sat there wrestling with the decision, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Clara. Turn on the news. I grabbed the remote. The headline hit me like a punch. Former executive found dead in apparent accident. The picture on the screen was Hayes. I froze. The report said his car had gone off the road late that evening. Police suspected no foul play, but I knew better. He'd been silenced. The woman at the cafe had warned me. The people behind him were still out there, and they'd just erased their biggest liability. I looked down at the flash drive, my reflection trembling in the metallic surface. Suddenly, I understood why Hayes had smiled when he was taken away. He knew he was already a dead man, but his downfall would trigger something much bigger. Maybe that was his final play, to drag the truth into the open no matter the cost. That night, I made a choice. I encrypted the files and sent copies to a trusted journalist and an anonymous whistleblower platform. If something happened to me, the truth would still come out. I didn't do it for revenge anymore. I did it because someone had to stop the cycle that started with a simple raise request and ended in millions lost, careers destroyed, and a man dead. When the sun rose, I stood by the window, watching the city come alive again. My phone buzzed one last time, a new message with no sender ID. It said only 3 words, "You did well." I didn't know who it was from. Maybe the woman from the cafe. Maybe someone else entirely. But as I read those words, I felt something strange. Peace mixed with unease. The story wasn't over, but the truth was finally free. Behind me, the computer screen went dark as I shut it down. Outside, life carried on as if nothing had happened. But I knew that somewhere, someone had just realized their secrets weren't safe anymore. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because no matter how powerful they were, the truth had finally won. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end, just the beginning of another story waiting to unfold. In the days that followed, the city seemed to move slower, as if the air itself was heavy with everything that had happened. The news of Hayes' sudden death spread quickly, and the company tried to control the story. They released statements about tragic loss and unexpected circumstances, painting him as a man who had simply buckled under pressure. But I knew the truth, and soon others would too. 2 mornings later, the first article went live. It wasn't dramatic or sensational. It was factual, clear, and quietly explosive. It detailed financial inconsistencies, shell companies, and confidential leaks. My name wasn't mentioned, which was exactly how I wanted it. But the files I had shared were there, piece by piece, connecting everything Hayes had done and exposing the people above him. Within hours, it spread everywhere. The company's stock fell. Executives stepped down. An investigation was launched. When I arrived at the office that day, it was chaos. Reporters outside, employees whispering, phones ringing nonstop. Clara found me near the elevators, clutching a folder to her chest. "You did it," she said softly. "It's out." I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. Just tired. "It's not about winning anymore," I said. "It's about cleaning up the mess." We both knew things wouldn't go back to normal. The company would rebuild, rebrand, maybe even survive, but it would never be the same again. And neither would I. The story that started with a raise and a demotion had turned into something much larger, a fight for truth, for fairness, for self-respect in a system built to protect the powerful. Later that week, I was called into a meeting with an external audit team. They'd been brought in to help restructure operations. The lead investigator, a calm older man, asked me to walk them through everything I knew. I told them everything, from the first strange meeting with Hayes, to the deleted files, to the night the envelope slid under my door. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then the man nodded. "You did the right thing," he said. "Most people would have looked away." That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. No calls, no messages, no knocks on the door. Just quiet. When I woke up, the world felt lighter. Weeks passed. Corporate replaced most of the leadership team, and investigations continued. The board reached out, not to scold or threaten me, but to thank me. They offered me a new role, a position where I could help rebuild the integrity of the company. It wasn't the promotion I'd once dreamed of, but it felt better. Real. Honest. Clara stayed, too. We became closer through it all, not just as coworkers, but as friends who had seen the worst of people and still believed in doing the right thing. One afternoon, as we packed up to leave, she looked at me and smiled. You know, if you hadn't spoken up, none of us would have changed. I shook my head. If you hadn't warned me, I might not have made it this far, I said. The office atmosphere slowly shifted. The fear that had hung over everyone began to fade. People started sharing ideas again, working without the shadow of manipulation. For the first time in a long while, it felt like a real team. But sometimes, late at night, I still thought about the woman at the cafe. I never saw her again, never heard from her. Maybe she was part of something bigger, maybe not. But I often wondered what she meant when she said I was dangerous because I cared. Maybe she was right. Maybe caring is dangerous in a world that rewards silence. But that's what makes it powerful. One evening, as I walked home, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, I passed a newsstand. Another headline about the investigation caught my eye. This one focused on how whistleblowers had helped uncover a network of corruption across multiple companies. It wasn't just ours. The truth was rippling outward. That's when I realized, sometimes one small act, one voice, can start something far bigger than you ever imagined. I stopped by the cafe again, the same one where everything had changed. I ordered a coffee and sat in the same corner. The barista didn't recognize me, which was fine. I wasn't there to be recognized. I was there to remember. The noise of the espresso machine, the hum of quiet conversations, it all felt strangely peaceful now. I thought about Hayes, not as the villain he became, but as a man who made choices that led him down a dark path. Maybe once, he believed he was doing the right thing too. Greed has a way of convincing people they're smarter than the system. But in the end, it always catches up. He lost everything. Not just money, but trust, respect, and finally his life. That was the real tragedy. When I stepped outside, the sky was turning orange with sunset. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze on my face. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small or powerless. I felt grounded. I had faced fear, manipulation, and loss, and somehow come out stronger. The story of the $60 million deal wasn't just about betrayal or corporate greed. It was about how easily we can lose ourselves chasing validation, and how much strength it takes to stand up when it would be easier to stay quiet. It taught me that integrity isn't loud, it's steady. It's the quiet decision to keep doing what's right even when no one's watching. A month later, as part of the company's restructuring, they hosted a town hall meeting. The new CEO spoke about rebuilding trust and creating transparency. When she mentioned my name among those who'd helped uncover the truth, the room applauded. I didn't expect it, and it felt strange, but also good. For once, doing the right thing didn't feel like a burden. It felt like freedom. After the meeting, as I was about to leave, I got a text from an unknown number. My pulse quickened, but this time the message wasn't threatening. It simply said, "Truth always finds a way." No name, no hint of who sent it. I smiled faintly, tucked my phone away and walked out. Whoever it was, maybe that mysterious woman, maybe someone else, I knew they were right. The truth had found its way. Through fear, through lies, through silence. And as I stepped into the fading light, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes, life doesn't reward you immediately for doing what's right. Sometimes it costs you, but in the long run, it gives you something far greater, peace of mind, self-respect, and the kind of strength that no title or paycheck can replace.